It's not. It's not what's on the top shelf. Oh, you know, Janet said you've been looking.
My aunt and uncle used to have a sweet shop. I used to help them. Temple Fortune. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh my goodness.
What did I miss?
We're in colour.
Nothing.
Rabbi.
Too young.
How are we all doing this evening? Everyone okay?
Good evening.
How are you?
Good
Hello,
evening.
Julia.
Hello, Julia.
Hello. Hello.
Doreen, hi, Michael.
No, okay. No, okay.
Did you get all your shopping yesterday, Doreen? Good.
Nothing like fresh vegetables or fruit.
But nothing like, I always go shopping. I like to pick what I like.
So do I.
Yes.
When I get them online, 9 times out of 10,
Yes.
the apples are horrible, the plums are soft, the grapes are soft.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, I like to choose. Yes.
Certain things I like to choose.
Yeah.
I like to choose the topics of my shirim.
Instead of doing what Lisa tells you to do.
Go for it, Rabbi.
Right. Good evening, everyone. Lovely to see you all. Let's mute ourselves just for no unexpected interruptions. So we're back 2 weeks ago. We started these topics, which I find very interesting because I think I said then that these are some of the most common questions that I get as a rabbi, help rabbi, I've trained to have my kitchen. And I wanted to use these shiurim because these are we're learning together as opposed to just doing a Q&A, to delve into some of the background behind the topic so we can try and together to understand how one, i.e. me or other rabbis, apply the rules. And the best way of doing that is to look through the halakhic process, which is what we're going to do this evening. Try and make it sort of lighthearted and fun, even though, as I said last time, people spend hundreds of years doing smicha on these topics. So what we can cover in the next 30, 40 minutes, we'll do our best. So that's what we're going to cover. Before that, I felt a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the right word. It came up at the end of the last session and I brushed it off because I don't know how to deal with it. Nothing's wrong, but I just thought I'm going to start with it because I kept you all in suspense. But someone, it's not related to the shir today, but someone asked me at the end of the last one about burying cutlery in the garden. Who was it? Julia? Was it you? Did you ask it? Someone asked me, Carol. I can't. But someone asked me last time.
I did.
How's it, Bernie?
Yeah, good. Thank you, and yourself.
Yeah. So just so we all understand, do you have currently cutlery buried in your garden?
Not at the moment. That's all grown.
It's all grown, right? Yeah. So hands up or wave at the screen if you've heard about this. Okay. Oh, everyone is waving. Okay. Perfect. Right.
I've done it.
One second. Well, that's question number 2. Now wave if you yourself have buried cutlery or anything in the garden for kashrus reasons. Wow. Several of you have done this. So at what point do I let you into a little secret?
It's not kosher.
I think it's made up. And that's why I didn't want to answer it when I was asked it, because I've always understood it to be made up. And Graham, you made it up? No.
I think it's a Bummermeister, as they say.
My parents used to do it for Pesach.
For Pesach?
For Pesach. They kashered the knife, only the knives, obviously. They kashered the knives first, and then they put them in the ground. And I think the origin is, I believe I read it somewhere, or heard it somewhere, that it's to do with actually cleaning it rather than kushering it, to get off any. You don't have to leave it in the ground; just put it in the ground and take it out again to get off anything. That's what I've heard, but I know more. I know no more than that.
We used to bury it and then boil it afterwards. Bury it and then boil it afterwards. And then boil it afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. David Lerner is telling everyone that's how he has a bath. What you
I
boil
had-
yourself, then bury it. No, anyway, go on, Viv.
I had heard that it could only be used if you say had meat cutlery and you cut a very hard piece of cheese, which we don't have these days because even our mature cheddar is not of the hard cheese that is mentioned in the halacha.
Yeah.
And the reason you did that is because you always kasher in the way that something has been made treif. So cutting a very hard piece of cheese, you then have to put it in the ground so that the ground scratches the knife like the hard cheese had cut it.
Oh, beautiful, Viv. Beautiful. I could not put it better myself. So, Doreen, go on, go for it.
My grandmother, who originally was from Russia, before Pesach, my two cousins and myself, we used to have a little plot in the back of our garden in Cranich Road in Stamford Hill.
With knives.
Yeah, and we used to put all the Pesach cutlery that's been away in a cupboard since the year before in the ground, but it used to I think it was actually in a pillowcase, right? And then we used to take it out in a bucket and we used to bring it into the kitchen, and the kitchen was one of those great big cast iron enamel things that you could actually have a bath in yourself.
Yeah.
And we used to wash it in cold water, hot water, cold, just salt. Yeah, and salt. I thought to myself, hang on a minute, I'm not koshering the chicken. And she used to do that every Pesach, and the cutlery that we used every day, non-Pesach, that used to be put in the garden in another pillowcase until after Pesach. And I never understood why only the cutlery. But it wasn't just the cutlery, Rabbi. It was the soup ladle. It was everything to do with the cooking,
the kids,
and everything. The knives, the forks, and the.
That's from Russia with love.
So let's just put this in the ground. Let's put this to bed, right? so as Viv said, and Graham also said, this is what I believe. If anyone would like to come with an actual source for this, I did have a quick look before because I can't find it. My understanding has been there is a halakhic principle, as Viv said, about and this is how we practice today. How something received its flavor, that's how you have to change the flavor or to get rid of it. So you kosher a saucepan. You don't take a blowtorch to a saucepan because usually a saucepan is filled with liquid, and that's how it's used. A frying pan, you can't take a frying pan. You shouldn't take a frying pan and dip the frying pan into boiling water because you don't usually use a frying pan in that way. You use it with intense heat, so you should take a blowtorch. Different, again, specific questions have to be dealt with in specifics. So when you have a knife, and a knife that has ridges especially, and you're using it to either cut something that's sharp in flavor or something that's greasy like a hard cheese like Viv was saying, there was a practice that they used to take the knife out into the gardens or utensil out in the gardens and stab it in the ground 10 times. And not leave it there, because leaving it there, shum davar, does nothing. It's like some hocus pocus thing, right? They used to strike it, thrust it into the ground 10 times to allow, as Viv said, the soil to interact with the ridges of the knife to remove any of the substance that was left on the knife. That, I believe, is the source of this very strange custom that has come out of somewhere that a lot of people seem to know about. It's interesting. I didn't want to do it last time because I felt like I wanted to do it properly, but a few people asked me afterwards, but like, what is the answer? Again, if you've got any specific questions, I felt I needed to deal with that. And it is all relative and all related to what we're talking about today. To sum up the last class we did, because we're not going to deal with that today, but to sum it up in one sentence, we dealt with the principle of, anyone remember the 3 words in Hebrew? Noisein noten ta'am lifgam. Right, noten tam livgam, literally translate noten tam, the flavor that is given or absorbed into a vessel is pagum. It is irrelevant after a certain amount of time. Therefore, if you've got a meat pot that was used for meat and a certain amount of time passes, the flavor becomes pugum, it becomes annulled, it becomes blemished in some way, it's disregarded, and therefore becomes irrelevant. That's what we spoke about last time. We spoke about the quality of the flavor in the time it was used in. And that was last year. And again, we have to be careful with applying these things. So I want to look at something different today. I want to look at parav food and how that, because I can tell you now, I think my mum's on here. So growing up, we had a meaty stuff, milky stuff, Pesach meaty stuff, Pesach milky stuff, spare meaty stuff, the good meaty stuff, the bad milky stuff, and then the parav stuff for all of the above. Right, and it makes perfect sense to my mum, and it probably makes perfect sense to most of you who are nodding, telling me that, yeah, if you want to cook a soup, make it parav, and then you can decide how to use it that evening. And you know what? It does make sense if you've got the time, the space, the energy, or if you've grown up that way. We don't do that for various reasons. We have very little milky stuff in our house for obvious reasons. And therefore, most of our parav stuff is just cooked in meat. But I'm now going to ask all of my rabbis in front of me a question. I want to see what you respond. I'm now ringing. Hi, this is a congregant of the Belmont community. I'm speaking to all of you as rabbis. I have a shaila. I came down the stairs and I fancied making some pasta. So I took the pasta and I took a clean meaty pot. Didn't know when it was last used. And I took a clean meaty pot and I cooked the pasta. And I went to the pasta. After it cooled down, I'm going to make supper. And I was about to start making supper. I thought I've made it meaty, so I'll put some, I don't know, tuna in it, and I'll put some salad in it and some dressing over it. We'll have a tuna pasta salad. And I'm about to start doing that. And my wife comes down and says she really fancies pasta with cheese. Right? That's what she fancies. Now, I want to be a good husband. I've got a whole pot of pasta cooked here. It was a misunderstanding. I thought she wanted a tuna pasta salad. Actually, she wants macaroni cheese. So I phoned my rabbis, all of you guys. Can I then take the cold pasta that was cooked in a clean meaty pot, and can I take cheese and have it with, let's say, cold or hot cheese? Please, answers now. And I want to know why. Don't just say no, or don't just say yes. I want to know why. Anyone? Come on, have a go. I promise I don't bite. By the way, if I thought you all had the answers and had all the reasons for the answers, we wouldn't need a
I
sheet.
think it's no, because it was hot and there could have been flavours from the pot, the meaty flavours gone into the pasta.
Oh,
if it had not, doesn't matter that it's now cold. That doesn't make any difference. But I might be wrong, obviously.
Oh, I want you to answer. That's an excellent answer. Yeah. David Lerner has asked, the question is this kosher? Is what kosher, David? He's muted. We'll leave him muted for a while.
You asked whether you could do something. I said you can. The question is it kosher?
Pots for me.
Thank you. Go on, Doreen. You go
on. I've got pots specifically for pasta. I've got one pot.
That's why is it kosher?
I don't think.
I want to know, can I take the pasta that was cooked in a meaty pot and eat it with milk or cheese?
No.
Okay, why not? What do you think what Caroline said?
Yes, because the pot has already been cooked and the juices, I mean, as wonderful as you are at cooking, there is that element of meaty something in a crevice somewhere in the pot.
Very good. Okay, anyone got a different answer? And it's, okay,
I think you can with the, if the cheese is cold, you definitely can. And about melted cheese, I don't know.
I love the definitely can. I want to know why, Viv. I've got meaty pasta.
Because the cheese is cold and the pasta's now cold. Oh. So the meat can't come out of the cold pasta and mix with that cheese. So I think I wouldn't do it just in case. I'd have to ask you. But
phone me.
but can you? But if the answer is you can, my question would be: do I eat it in a meaty bowl or a milky bowl?
Oh, excellent. Okay, good. I'll come back to that, Caroline. Sue, go on, Sue. Well, I mean, Sue Rosen.
You can't have the cheese on it, but you could have a milky drink after it. Oh. You're not meaty, but you can't have cheese actually served on it. Or,
that's what I would say.
Or whatever.
Yeah, you're not meaty as such, no. Yeah.
As long as the pan hadn't been used for me the 24 hours previously.
Oh, amazing. Julia, are you trying to speak? Or are you just talking to Graham? No, you look like you were talking to me, but I wasn't sure if you're just commenting on the comment.
I was just thinking, when you go to the shops and you see various things like in the kosher deli, and they say something like, although this is parov, it's been cooked in a meaty pan, I assumed they meant that then you couldn't use it with a milky meal.
So what we've gathered is there's actually plenty of different ways of looking at this. So we all agreed. Are you desperate to know what the answer is? Tune in next week. No, okay, here we go. Here we go. So now we're going to learn something together. So I've now hopefully got your taste buds working, and I'm going to try and make this simpler than I did last week. I'm going to try. Okay, here we go. There is a very simple Gemara. We're going to look at the first source quickly. A very, very simple Gemara, as you can see now. So this is a principle of what we call nut bar nut. Very strange language. I will explain all, right? So we're looking now for, it's all about parov foods that is cooked, not like my mum, in non-parov utensils. So it's cooked potentially in meaty milky utensils. And how do we view it? Now, there is a very important, very short machloches, dispute between two of our great Talmudic sages, one being Rav and one being Shmuel, as we're going to see on the screen. And Rav and Shmuel disagree about the following case. What is that case? Itmar, says the Gemara.
Yeah, always.
Right? Itmar, says the Gemara. Dagim sha'alu b'ka'ara. Let's say you've got a fish. Fish is a great thing to use here because it's parov, right? Intrinsically. Let's say you've got a fish. And the simple case of the Gemara is that this fish that was cooked totally parov, let's just say you've got a brand new rack on some coals, you put it down, you've cooked the fish, it's totally parov, never been used before utensils. You've got a parov piece of fish, sha'alu bakara, and you place that hot cooked fish on a meaty plate. We're going to understand the Gemara simply. On a meaty plate. Rav Amar, in the bold words, asur la'achlam b'kutach. Rav says you cannot now take that fish and eat it together with a kutach. What's a kutach, I have you say? A kutach, for our purposes this evening, is a milky dish. Some people want to say it's a drink. Some people say, let's just call it lasagna, right? You can't take that fish that was cooked parov, is intrinsically parov, but then lands up on a meaty plate. You can't then eat it with a milky meal, right? Shmuel says, Amar, mutar la'achlam b'kutach. You can. Okay, it's parov. The plate's the plate, but the fish is parov, so you can eat it with a milky meal. What, says the Gemara, are they arguing about? What are the principles behind this dispute? And the second line's here. Rav Amar, asur. Why does Rav say you can't? Because noten tamhu. That the plate, whatever this means, allowed the meaty flavor to be absorbed into or affect the fish in some way. So the fish, the hot fish on the meaty plate, absorbs some of the meat flavor. Shmuel Amar, says Shmuel, mutar, no, the fish is fine, you can eat it with milk, because noten tam bar noten tamhu, which is the nut bar nut abbreviation. And this last 2 weeks ago, it was noten ta'am lifgam, that the flavor that is given becomes annulled, becomes irrelevant. And this principle is nut bar nut. Noten tam, the flavor is given, literally, bar, son of, flavor given. Meaning it's essentially, I mean, the way we look at it is that it's a two-step process, says Shmuel. What are we talking about? Let's just explain it for 1 second. I just want to see your faces. Let's explain it for 1 second. That Rav says that that piece of fish that's cooked parov and ends up on a meaty plate will in some way absorb some of the meaty flavor on taste, whatever it might be, and then you can't eat it with the milk. Shmuel says no. The way he's understanding this case is that the 2 steps removed allows it. What are the 2 steps removed? Number 1, the fish itself is parov. The fish then gets taken off the heat, off the cooking utensil, and it's placed onto the plate. The plate then even if it does absorb or come into contact with meat from what was in the plate has no meat on it. It might have had meat on it at one stage, and the meat even might be absorbed into the plate, but because it's not being cooked on that plate, therefore it's like a two-step. It's bar, it's son of, it's noten tam, and then another noten tam, and therefore it's like a double. It cuts it removes itself from the intensity of any flavor, and therefore it's completely allowed. That's the machlokas, the simply put in the Gemara. Is that clear so far? If not, please now ask. Simply put, noten tam, bar noten tam, says Shmuel. It's one step, two steps removed, and therefore it's fine. We're all kosher. The Gemara concludes like Shmuel. So we're off to a good start, meaning there is some kind of leniency or some kind of allowance in a par of foods that in some way came in contact with either meat or milk, and then we want to be able to eat that. Now, we can't answer our pasta question yet. We have to go through, and this is what the halachic process looks like. Now, the Talmudic sages, that's their dispute. The Talmudic commentators, i.e. Rashi, try and understand actually what is the case of the Gemara. Where do Rav and Shmuel really lock heads? And there's going to be three different opinions of how we understand this Gemara, what the case is, and those three opinions are going to shape the halachic attitude to be able to answer this question. And it ain't simple, right? It's not simple because, like all halachic matters, there's several sides, even today, to how we paskin, and it might depend where your grandparents are born. So let's see what happens if we go a little bit further into this halachic journey. So we had the Gemara, we've had the case. Comes along the Rivan. The Rivan, brought in the Tosfot, is the son-in-law of Rashi. And he says, B'Shem Rashi, in the name of my great father-in-law Rashi, this is how I understand the Gemara. Dafka, what's the case? Alu sharu about nispashu asa. Where Shmuel, remember, the Gemara says we paskin, we follow the opinion of Shmuel, where nut bar nut is permissible, where noten tam bar noten tam, meaning the fish you can eat with milk. What's the case? The case is, like we read it originally, that the par of fish goes onto a meaty plate. So it's not being cooked in a meaty dish, it just sits on a meaty dish. That is the case, says the Rivan, but avan nitbashlo asa. If the fish, not like we understood the Gemara, but if the fish was actually cooked in a meaty dish, no meat, but cooked in a meaty pot, to kachad taima chashiv. It's as if the fish absorbs some of the meaty flavor, and therefore you couldn't eat it with milk. What's interesting, by the way, and we're not going to discuss this today, is we can't eat fish and meat together, right? That's a true story. That's not like the knives in the ground. We don't eat fish and meat. That's a different Gemara, a different shit. We're not going to go through that, but we're clearly not dealing with that in this case. So it's not as if that fish now becomes a piece of cow. It's just that it absorbs enough of the meat flavor to make it problematic to eat with milk. That's what the Rivan says. And he brings an example that he wants. And the reason why he says this, according to Rashi, is because his father-in-law Rashi was once approached by Ubam Maisel Afanav. A real true story happened. Someone phones up Rashi and says, I've just made a load of eggs in a milky pot. No milk, but a milky pot. And I want to take these eggs, I want to crack the shells and the nice boiled eggs, and I want to use them as stuffing for my meat dish. And what did Rashi say? You can't do it. So from there, and from obviously spending time with his father-in-law, the Rivan says that if it's cooked in a meaty pot, if that pasta is cooked in a meaty pot, you can't take it and eat it with milk. That's opinion number one. Please stop me. I'm going to keep going for a moment before we stop. But if you've got any questions or it's not clear, you must ask. Opinion number two is how the rest of the Tosfos actually read this Rashi. And you know what? I'm just going to, I'll say it quickly and then we'll explain it outside. Says Rashi, again, we are looking for understanding of when Shmuel says he allows the fish to be eaten with milk, what's the case? So the Rivan said the case is, as we understood it, the par of fish gets placed on a meaty plate and then you can't eat it with milk. Says the rest of the Tosfos how we understand this Rashi. I'm going to go pick it up from the Inami. Inami, Moide Shmuel she'asa le'echel chalav roiteach b'ka'ara d'noitin tam rishon. Heavy kabasa gamur. Says, I understand, and everyone would agree, that if the pot itself had meat in it, and you put a par of food in it, and cook that par of food in with the meat, you're going to have a problem, because that is actual meat. Aval ka'ara zuhi atzma eina basa. But the pot itself, even if meat was cooked in it at a previous point, the clean, meaty pot is not a piece of meat. It's the flavor, but it's not the meat itself. And that flavor is not a mushroom. It's not there. There's no actual substance to it. And therefore, there are those that want to understand Rashi is saying, what does Shmuel say you can do? Shmuel says you can do this. If your fish or your pasta is put in a clean, meaty pot and cooked, you can have it with the kutach, you can have it with the milk. So there are two opinions of the Talmudic commentators so far that we've seen that look at the case in the Gemara and understand it. The Rivan says the case is you take the fish, put it on a meaty plate, that you can eat with milk, but nothing else. The other opinions of the Tosfos says no. As long as there's no actual meat in the pot, if you're cooking a par of food in a meaty pot, you can still eat it with milk. Clear? Yeah? Third opinion, and then we're not going to give any more opinions on that, right? Third opinion, which is a little bit in between, right? And I didn't bring this in the source sheet because it's part of a much bigger conversation, and I'm trying to keep it a bit streamlined, right? Opinion number 3 is a middle ground. A bit like what Viv was talking about before in terms of how flavor is absorbed. So if it's a pot, or what we call a tavshil, and it's used within liquid, that's one way. A frying pan or an oven, its food is absorbed, the flavor is absorbed in a different way. So there are those that want to understand that actually, if the pasta, let's keep with the pasta, it's nice and simple. If pasta is boiled in water, then that would be okay. That would be okay because it's cooked in a liquid, and in some way that liquid sort of absorbs out some of the flavor of what's being cooked, and it sort of pacifies it, unlike roasting or frying. Because not deep frying, just let's say shallow frying or roasting. If I take a chicken and I flavor a chicken and I put it in the oven, that chicken is sitting in that pan, and all that chicken is being directly absorbed into the pan in the oven. But if I take that chicken and I boil it, yes, the chicken is now being absorbed into the water, which is now being absorbed into the pot. But because it's being cooked in a pot of water, in some way it reduces the intensity of that chicken flavor that's being cooked. And therefore, this middle ground opinion says, like the Rivan, when it comes to roasting or frying, therefore, you can only eat that par of food with milky if it just hit the plate. So if you fried a schnitzel, if you fried the fish in a frying pan, a meaty frying pan. No, I'm getting myself confused. You take the fish and you cook it and you put it onto the. You know what? I'm literally going around in myself doing somersaults in my head to try and keep this so simple without going into. I have to read it in the sources. 3 opinions. Number 1, on the plate. Number 2 is cooked in a clean meaty pot. And number 3, there's a difference between, we're going to keep it simple, a difference between frying, roasting, and cooking. Does that kind of make sense until now? Yeah? Dorian, do you want to ask a question?
Yes. I know you're probably going to think I'm mad, and everybody else is. But when I was growing up in a very, very frum house, we had glass plates specifically.
Oh, I'm going to stop you. Glass, mashu acher, something different. Is it a question on what we've said so far? I just want to.
No.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I need to keep going. Otherwise, I'm going to get myself lost. In trying to keep this simple, I apologize. I'm trying to keep this simple. No. I'm going to confuse myself, right? Okay, so, David Lerner, you went like that when I said, does it make sense? What isn't clear? I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I can. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, here we go. Right. But no, so according to what we've said so far, I'm going to go back to the first question. According to what we said, can we eat the pasta that was cooked in a clean meaty pot with cheese? How are you going to answer? Graham's nodding. Why, Graham? Sorry to put you on the spot, only because you were nodding. Feel free to throw it back at me and make me explain.
Because on the basis of the opinions you've just given.
Yeah. So one opinion said yes, one opinion said no.
Well, yes, but if you're following Shmuel, then, which is quite unusual, because normally you follow Rav.
Let's not go there.
Okay. But if you're following Shmuel, then Shmuel says you can do it. So if the
One second. Shmuel said you can do what? That's what we're arguing. There's different opinions as to what Shmuel says, right? So according to one opinion, Shmuel says, no, if it was cooked in that pot, you can't eat it with the cheese. But what Shmuel says, according to the other opinion, it says if it was cooked parav, totally parav, let's say you had the other opinion said, no, the case is actually you've cooked your meat, you cooked your pasta in a parav pot, right? Like my mum does. You've cooked your pasta in a parav pot. Sorry, mum, you're just, it's easy, right? You've got your pasta in a parav pot. You then take the pasta and put it, let's assume the pasta or the plate is warm, just for the process of understanding this. The hot pasta, piping hot pasta, parav pot, you pour it into a meaty colander. Oh, right, this is a good case. You pour it into the meaty colander, and now as it's cooling down, you wanna, when it's cold, have it with the cheese. That, according to one opinion, you can do. And the other opinion says, actually, no, even if you cooked it in the meaty pot, you can do. That's where we are with this. So this is looking great for us, right?
Yeah.
Don't leave yet, because you'll have the totally wrong impression. Okay, it's not as simple as I would love to present it. Let's go back to the sheet now. What does the halacha say? I just want to check from my notes that I haven't missed anything important. Okay, let's see what the halacha says. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, here in, let's read the English. Let's keep it even simpler. Fish that were cooked or roasted in a well-washed meaty pot with no fat stuck to it, so it's clean as clean can be, are permissible to eat with a kutach. Right, automatically we can see that Rav Yosef Karo likes not the Rivan, he likes the main opinions within Rashi, right? That it's actually cooked in a clean meaty pot. Food cooked in a clean meaty pot, you can eat with milk. Why? Because in this case, the fish are 2 degrees removed. Noten tam, bar noten tam, and therefore permissible. If the pot was not well washed, it's a different topic now. So now we're saying, actually, it turns out that you thought it was a clean meaty pot, but when you look down afterwards, you see, oops, guilty, didn't wash it up properly. Or as one of my housemates at uni walked into the kitchen, picked up a pot that was sitting there, smelled it, went, it's probably all right, and started using it. Wasn't me. I looked in disgust as he did that. But let's say that, and then you have to look at it differently. I don't want to go there just now. I don't want to overly confuse us. So simple understanding of Shulchan Aruch says kazeh. It's fine. You can take something that's parav, you can cook it in a milky pot, or you can cook it in a meaty pot, and then as long as it's, essentially cooled down, you can't actually mix meat and milk, you can mix it and eat it with the other thing. Now that would be all very well and good if we didn't have the Ramah. The Ramah is Rav Moshe Isserles. So if the Shulchan Aruch is the Sfardi Rav, the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, for those of you that came to Poland, we went to his shul and his grave in his graveyards in Krakow, in a cemetery. So he writes, he's the authority for the Ashkenazi world. And he says that v'yesh machmirim, there are those that are strict when it comes to the same. And he wants to say, like the Rivan, the first opinion we saw. And actually, we're not talking or not allowing a case where if you cook that pasta in a meaty pot, you can't eat it with milk or milk product, right? Which is kind of where people wanted to get to at the end of that conversation that we had at the beginning. And he says, that's if you're going out and setting out to do that. So that's the case, he says. If I come down and I say, Lise, do you want pasta for dinner? And she says, yes, sure. I have to find out before we get going if she wants a meaty pasta, a parav pasta, or a milky pasta. I can't just cook the pasta and then ask. According to Shulchan Aruch, you can mix them. You can. And that is a halacha that gets brought down in modern day interpretations. If you go and speak to, well, you can't because he's no longer with us, Rav Yosef, if you speak to a lot of Sfardi Rabbonim, they will tell you, you can cook that pasta in a meaty pot, as long as it's clean, a meaty pot, and then afterwards, whack it in, once it's cooled down, of course, whack it in with your milky stuff, right? Comes along the Ramah and says, no, if you cook meaty pasta, you can't at any point, a bit like what Sue is saying, you can't at any point have it with milk. It doesn't make you, well, let's find out. Let's look down one more source. Does it make you meaty, right? We have to know this, right? Let's look at what the Ramah says in source number 6. If there is no meat in the cooked dish, you cook your pasta in a clean meaty dish. He said you can't have it with milk. Only that it was cooked in a pot used for meat, it is permitted to eat cheese afterwards. There is no custom to be stringent and to wait 3 hours. There is a custom to eat meat after a cooked dish that has cheese. Okay, that's a different thing, right? So let's see all your lovely faces again. So going back, there's a couple more things that we need to talk about briefly before we finish, but because there's a few topics that just we need to mention and how to take this down another level. There is then, therefore, a difference of opinion between Ashkenazi and Sephardi opinion. So if I was to frame the question one last time before none of you ever want to even think about a piece of pasta again in your lives, right? If someone cooked meaty pasta in a meaty pot, and now it's cooled down and they want to eat it with milk, according to Sfardim, they can. According to Ashkenazim, they can't. If according to Ashkenazim who said you can't, you did it, right? Let's just say I cooked the pasta. It's meaty. It's in the fridge. It's sitting in a plastic bowl, right? A silver tray in your fridge. And I go to work, and the following day, Lisa thinks, oh, I'm going to make a lovely dinner for us tonight. And I fancy cheese because Lisa fancies cheese, right? And I would never, and that's why I cook it meaty all the time. But Lisa fancies cheese. So she takes that cold, meaty pasta and cooks it with cheese. And she comes home, look, honey, I've made you dinner, right? Based on a true story. And I go, was that the pasta that I used yesterday? And it's there, sitting there. And we've been married 2 days, right? It's all on the line. First home-cooked meal. What can you do? So according to the Ramah, it says, once you've done it, right, we don't allow it from the get-go. But if it's happened, because there are so many different opinions to rely on, because the Shulchan Aruch says you can do it, you can go ahead and eat it, but you shouldn't do it l'chat chila. You shouldn't do it from the outset. Make sense so far? Come on, does make a bit of sense, right? Even if you haven't followed all the logic of the Gemara. Now, this leads us on to a fascinating topic of what we call cheskas chalavi. Now, one of you mentioned it. I think it was Caroline or Sue or Viv or someone. One of you mentioned about buying the foods that said it was cooked in a meaty pan. Who was that? Julia. I knew it was you. I said it was Julia, I'm sure, right? So there are certain products, actually, that you see that have the OU on them, right? If you go to Costco, you can play the kosher symbol game. Have you ever done that? How many products can you find a kosher symbol from in Costco? If you've never played that game, it's most fun around the crisps section because you'll be, you can probably even find it, I don't know, on batteries if you really want, or a sauna. But if you stick to the food section, in not just the crisps, all the way down that side, so many of those products it often depends, pickles, sweets, nuts, crisps, they have a kosher symbol on. Sometimes you'll see an OU with a DE. Right? DE. DE stands for dairy equipment. So we call that in the halachic sphere, cheskas chalavi, that this product has got a chazakah, it's been established that it's cooked in a milky oven, meaning it's not a cheese boreka, it's an apple Danish. But that apple Danish has been cooked in an oven that also cooked the cheese borekas. So if you walk into any of the bakeries in Israel, you have to be careful, or even in England, truthfully, if you go to Carmeli's or Grod's or wherever you're going to be, and you're going to buy your ogalach, you've got to make sure that they're really parav. Because if they cook if they're mixing their meat and their milk, It could be you can't have your rogalach with your tea in the morning, and that could ruin Shabbos, right? So you don't want it. So what does cheskat chalavi mean? Based on everything we said, right? Because surely, Rabbi, surely, right? Based on everything we said, there should be no such thing as cheskat chalavi, because we've said if something that is parov cooked, we're not talking about a cheese bareka, we're talking about apple Danish or rogalach, right? If if the oven, if the pot, the tray is clean, and now it gets cooked at a separate time to the milky thing, why is that going to be an issue? Because we've said, well, according to Sfardim, it's for sure not an issue. According to Ashkenazim, after the fact it was done, maybe I don't know it was done, I can eat it, right? So why does cheskat chalavi have an issue in products? Why do factories or the kosher symbols put it on products? Because especially in some of these big factories where we know that they're not as strict as, let's say, the halakhic process is, and maybe the machine wasn't cleaned properly, maybe in that particular thing, it's a crisp. There are definitely brands of crisps that have DE. They're vegetable flutes. I mean, there's no milk in them. It even says, contains no wheat, contains no dairy, yet it's got DE, dairy equipment. So if it has to by law, right? So what some of the halakhic authorities, some of the kosher authorities are worried about is maybe there's a tiny corner of the factory thing that wasn't cleaned properly. Or in the bakery's concern is, it could be that they are cooking those apple danishes at the same time as the cheese barekas. So that's why if you're buying something that was said cooked in a meaty pan and you don't know the history of that particular item, let's say you walk into one of the delis like Reich. I think in Reich you have to assume everything's meaty, right? I love it. You go to the weddings at the back and they're pushing out the most gorgeous, delicious food, and there's some old gent who's 207 who's just frying the spring rolls in the back van. It's fantastic, and it tastes great, right? You can't go wrong. Love Reich. He's a tzaddik, by the way. I mean, if he goes on a Friday and just empties his factory with any food left over to anyone that needs it, if he is, there's a shiva house. Anyway, we digress. What were we saying? Oh, so if there is a genuine assumption that it's cooked meaty or with meaty or whatever it is, I would insist it's good practice to keep it and only eat it with milk. Where the issue comes, and I think we put it out for Rosh Hashanah actually, we put it in our notes when we did our baking, our oven is that we use for almost all of our baking is meaty because we eat meat a lot, or we cook parov in meat a lot, and our milky oven is just really a grill. We should have done it the other way around in hindsight, but then it gets so little used, the milky oven. Anyway, I think if we could do it again, I would use the milky oven that we use at the grill as a meat oven, and then keep the other one. Anyway, it's this is not therapy. So therefore, focus. Therefore, and you can just stop me from waffling at any point, by the way, and ask other questions. I've got one more thing I just want to talk about, because we have two more things very, very briefly, and then I'll leave it open to any more questions. So therefore, you have to be careful. So we put in our Rosh Hashanah, even though it was a whiskey square and a ginger cake in there, we cooked all in a meaty oven. So we just said, please notice that this has been cooked in a meaty oven. And therefore, one might want to refrain from drinking a cup of tea, either with, or just, it doesn't make you meaty, but just to be aware. It's very important to be aware and keep those two things separate. One thing I'm not going to talk about, and that's something I said last week I wasn't going to talk about, and that's called a davar charif, something that is sharp. And if we're talking about onions or pickles or anything acidic, that we can't apply all of these principles. It's a different topic. That's why knives themselves can be a bit problematic as well. I'm just mentioning it because it's important to notice, and maybe we'll do a share on Harif because it's fascinating, but it's not for now. It's a whole separate Gemara that we need to deal with. And the final question that I can deal with today, and then I'll leave it up to the questions, is the famous, or one of the famous dishwasher questions. The dishwasher. That awful, gut-wrenching, heart-stopping moment when you open your dishwasher and find the milky spoon in the meaty dishwasher. In the basket, it's there, that innocent little pintala, that little spoon that can ruin your day, right? So, rabbis, rebbitzins, what do? You've opened your meaty dishwasher, and there, sparklingly clean, is a milky spoon. What do you do?
Put it in the soil.
Bury it. bury your
it.
head in the soil.
That's
Okay.
what I used to.
Don't go to Caroline for your Shiloh there, please. Okay, Liz.
Do you boil it in a milky saucepan?
Good question. I'll answer in a second. Viv.
I know that it's all right to put it straight back in the drawer because I've asked you twice recently with both dishwashers.
Stop it! You're ruining it. You're ruining it. Actually, I've done a little bit more research on it since we've spoken. So I've traced up your kitchen. No, not quite. The one thing you don't do is post it through my letterbox. Okay. Please don't post anything like that through my letterbox. Okay, so there are several different opinions, and there is most certainly what to rely on before you definitely do not need to take your dishwasher and bury it in the ground. Okay, that's you definitely need to do, right? Please don't do that. In fact, leave the dishwasher where it is and take all the meaty stuff and put it away. So what are we relying on? Well, we're relying on various different things. Number one, we're relying, and it comes into these not en tum by nut issues, and it comes into not en tum gum issues that we've discussed. It's a nice kind of sikum of some of the things a concluding note to some of the things we discussed, and also it adds in a few other principles. Soap is a huge principle here. If a food, when is a food not a food? When is a food not a food? So Lisa taught me this thing. So if you've got a plate full of food and you're having your meal and you're full, and you know that if you just leave the plate there, you're just going to keep eating it even though you don't want to eat it. So she said, you just spoil it. Obviously, if it's not going to go to the kids or someone else, you're not going to have it tomorrow. It's like you've eaten most of it, but there's a little bit there. It's going to go in the bin, but if it doesn't go in the bin, it's going to go in here. Just cover it with ketchup or mustard or spill the wine on it or something like that because you're not going to eat it. All of a sudden, it's not a food. Once you put soap into the frame or a strong detergent like a dishwasher, that changes the metzias, that changes what's going on in the dishwasher, right? So you've got a very, and then we're going to run a few things. Number one, a lot of people, and you know, I've even got into the habit of doing this, rinse things before putting them into the dishwasher. When it wasn't my dishwasher, i.e. growing up for 20 years in Boreham Woods, well, just put it straight in, it will get clean, someone else will put it away. Now I've become my father, and I rearrange the dishwasher after everyone else has gone in there piling it, right? I take things out and I rinse them, okay? I'm getting these grey hairs. So we rinse and take off, okay, there's still definitely mashmas, there's still definitely things on those plates, right?
Yeah, I do, that's what I do.
Right, exactly, right? So you take the spoon. Now the spoon, the knife, the fork, whatever it might be, if there is some residue on that, by the time it's cleaned properly with the piping hot water, with the soap, and the small amount that's there, if you find half of your dishwasher is milked up, then definitely don't post them through my letterbox, and then we're going to have a serious conversation. But essentially, if that milky spoon's found in there, option number one, and this is where there are those that will kosher it, by the way. There are those that I did not realize that, and I apologize. Now, you don't have to kosher it, so don't worry, okay? There are those that will say, lama lo, kosher it to be sure. Not the meaty stuff. Your meaty stuff's fine, but that one milky spoon, put it in boiling water for a few seconds, get it out, done, finished. And there are those that say, even if you don't do that, just leave it aside for 24 hours, because then you've taken out any suffix, any doubt, because of what we talked about 2 weeks ago, which was the idea of Eino Ben Yoma. After 24 hours, if it's a stainless steel, then it's not 10 ton left gum. It's any flavor that was there after 24 hours is it's nothing. It's not a mushroom. It's not there. It's not something you want to eat, and therefore that's what you can do. But worst case scenario, you can still take it as long as it's only one or two things and put it away in a drawer. Any questions? Anyone ask me? Yeah, Cynthia.
Yeah, it's funny. Doreen started talking about it, and I want to bring it up. When I was growing up, at Pesach, we used to put all our glassware
in the bath.
In the bath for 3 days. Oh.
3 days and changing the water in between?
Water every day, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you remember that?
That's less made up.
I do.
I know. I don't do it now, but I used to. Yes.
There's an idea that you can't kosher glass.
Oh, right.
Right.
No.
I did it with a decanter. I think I received from someone in the family. Yeah, Mum, is that right? I remember. Yeah, it was a decanter, and I think it had been used for sherry.
Oh.
And I seem to remember it was
Glasses from where?
many years ago. It was some proper crystal, and I think I ended up
Sand.
taking the kids, bathing it with the kids. No, but there's an idea of replacing the water. If you do it for 24 hours, replace the water 24 hours, because in some way that might absorb some of the flavor. But they say with glasses anyway, it's not such a problem. I've never really understood the necessity to do that, because especially with glass doesn't absorb flavor, that's for sure.
No.
So in theory, you can have a glass for meat and the same glass be used for milk. In theory, we don't practice that way because it just gets us confused.
Yeah.
And with Amazon today, I would all encourage you to go to China presentations and get really nice stuff. But with Amazon today, you can get for a few pounds, you can get all Morrison's. I've got a load of our glasses from Morrison's. It's really cheap. So to have glasses that we stick for meat.
Yes.
Separate. Pesach's a different issue. Pesach people tend to be stricter.
Yes.
And it's not a case of kosher versus meat and milk. It's a case of chametz, which is a much bigger issue than meat and milk. So people are much stricter for Pesach. Having said that, and you would know better than me, if you go to any sort of the circles I used to mix in Jerusalem, no one would use their oven for Pesach. They would all have these mini separate Pesach ovens. Right, Mum, remember that? And I remember asking a Rav back here in England, who I have great respect for, and I was asking what about, and he goes, "You think 100 years ago they had 2 ovens?
Exactly.
And a third for Pesach?" Having said that, the olden day ovens were a bit simpler to kosher out and clean. Now these ovens have got like every which way and up to be able to do. So it's not anyway. But listen, I'm not putting down the idea of being strict. I just think there's today I was writing up the Pesach guidelines, which will come out next week, for the 3-day Yontif, of which is Shabbat, Pesach, right? And Seder starts after Shabbat. It's very complicated this year. And I wrote a line in which I had to take out, something about, and when we're back to normal, and I was thinking, one second, I've just written 3 pages of guidelines, which are the most abnormal thing out of context about eating at a certain point and then taking the crumbs and shaking them out as long as you've done it by 10:04, and then have a glass of plastic cup of water to wash them out. I'm like, this is not normal. And we're waiting to get back to normal. We are not normal people. What we do, my good, well, when we moved back to London, we had our first Pesach in this flat, a lovely little flat in Monarch Court, and we had our cleaner, and it was the first year she was with us, and we introduced her to the Pesach clean, which we all know is a British spring clean with even more craziness. Anyway, so she came in and she was doing that, helping Lisa. I'm not saying us, helping Lisa. And then she went upstairs, she came back the following day. And that night, that was it. That night, she'd really done an amazing job. I took all the surfaces and I covered them with thick plastic, as you do. She came in the following day and was horrified. She said, "I cleaned properly. I promise you." I said, "No, it's not you, it's us. We're nuts, and only what they come in every year and they must think about us. We are crazy." But as what I've tried to show you a bit today is there is a reason for everything, right? And we're talking about, genuinely, what do you do? And hopefully, if you were able to follow the process from the Gemara down to the machloket, the dispute in the Gemara, trying then after that from the sages that came later to understand exactly what that dispute was and how that manifests into the halachic process between the Sephardi world and then the Ashkenazi world. A lot of it's based on Masorah, on the traditions from their rabbis, how they learned, understood, or they go back to the Gemara, or a lot of it comes from how they practice in their towns. The Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, will speak about that often in his halacha. The practice here in our town is to do as follows, and that's where the knives in the soil came from. It came from somewhere. It might be what we call a minhag shtus, a custom that actually has no founding in it, but it happens. And I'm not going to certainly knock anyone that does it, but there isn't, for that particular thing, there isn't. There was a whole article I once read about of Moshe Feinstein, the eminent, prominent Rav who died in the 80s in America, the go-to rabbi in America of that generation. And there was a whole article written that he held that the glue on stamps is treifed, so you can't lick a stamp and put it on, right? And
cow gut.
What?
I was told it had cow gut or something on it.
Wait for it. So it was written up in his name, and one of his students saw it, and they went to him and said, "Rebbe, is that true?" Like, what happened was he used to mail a lot of letters, and he did it all himself. And as he was getting older, his tongue would get dry, and he didn't want to lick it. So he got a little pot by his desk, and he dabbed the stamp on the sponge. It was nothing to do with kosher, but someone had taken it upon themselves to assume that they're rather. So we have to be careful. So don't look at me and do anything based on what you see me do. Please check first. Often I'm dancing circles around the kids, but anyway, I felt that this was a good topic to do because it's so practical in so many ways, and most of the questions between what I did 2 weeks ago and what I did this week that I get find their roots in these topics. There's plenty more to talk about, and when we get a break in other things, I want to come back to the kosher issue because I'd like to look at lab-grown meat, which is a topic I don't know a lot about, so I want to do a bit of research and present a share on that as well. And there's other things we could talk about as well in this topic. Plenty of different things we can talk about, but I believe the next week the share is being given by Diane Simons from the Bethlehem. So we said I apologize that we missed the first one, but I had my tooth issues. So I owe you a share on kashrus. Don't worry, you'll get it. I'll find a room for it. So next week's Diane Simon on Thursday night. The week after is please God, Rabbi Rafi Zarum for a pre-Pesach shiur, very kindly sponsored by the Boxer family. And then the week after that, it's Erev Pesach. So I'm sure I'll just be giving regular questions to everyone that has them anyway. Pesach guidelines coming out next week. And then after Pesach, the third term, I believe we are doing Shabbos. So I'll be doing 3 different things. I might do technology and Shabbos as well, like some things that we haven't discussed before. And there is a 4th topic as well. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's the plan, and to engage with Dayanim and to do that. So any further questions on this topic? Great. It's been a blast. Rabbi Kurz did a share on matmid, on lab. Yeah, so that is something that I would like to do. Lab-grown meats. I'm not sure I want to eat it, but I'd like to know if it's kosher. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye, everybody. Be well.
Bye.